Dr. Yang and colleagues, thank you very much for this kind invitation to meet with you. I want to tell you a story. It's about my first visit to an art museum. I was 19 years old, a young college student traveling through Europe. I went to the Louvre Museum. It seemed as if I had the museum all to myself. I walked from gallery to gallery, stopping before objects that caught my attention. I had very little knowledge of the history of art at the time, but I had a sensitive curiosity about individual works of art, strange things made of odd materials and provocative forms. One such thing was a tall, dark stone object. I had no idea what it was, but I was drawn to it by its peculiar shape, sculpted figurative decoration, and engraved markings, which I presumed to be some kind of ancient language. I stood before it in wonder for 20 or 30 minutes. I had never seen anything like it before. The more I looked at this mysterious object, the more curious I became, until I thought of myself as like the first peoples who saw it almost 4,000 years ago. They were humans like me. They had language as I had, and with the words they spoke, they exchanged ideas like my friends and I did. The object was the so-called Hammurabi Code, named after the ancient Mesopotamian king who was depicted on the object not as a great warrior king, but as the king of justice. I was astonished. I stood before the sculptor in rapt attention, as if Hammurabi were speaking to me personally, his words as meaningful in my time as they were in his, 4,000 years before I was born, in a land on the other side of the earth from where I lived. This is what museums can do, even or perhaps especially in a time of pandemic like now, when the world is drawn together in a common culture of risk and reward. They can confirm our common humanity, linking us together with people many miles and thousands of years away from us, whether we are in Paris or Shanghai or Mumbai or Los Angeles or in Hammurabi's time, Susa, today's Iran. By working with the Shanghai Museum, we will share our collections and offer people the opportunity I had as a young man to experience the world as strange and wonderful, distant in time and space, and as near and far as our observations and imagination make possible. That was the experience I had 50 years ago, and it's the experience I continue to have every time I go to a museum. Thank you again, Dr. Yang, and warmest best wishes to you and your colleagues.
Hello, I'm Neil MacGregor, and I was very honored when Director Yang asked me to say a few words about the power of museums. Because a museum is, I think, one of the most powerful institutions we have in our society today. And the power of a museum is that it enables us to talk with and to have a dialogue with a much wider range of people than would ever be possible in ordinary life. We all know how important it is to meet new people, hear new points of views, and find out how other people see the world. The wonderful thing about a museum is that it lets us speak with people over thousands of years. We can walk through time and stopping and looking at things made by somebody with a mind just like ours, with hands just like ours. Somebody who thought about what it meant to be alive, what it meant to die, what it meant to worry about illness or to hope for love. All those things are expressed in ways that are different from ours and allow us to think differently about our world, but above all, allow us to realize that our experience is part of the experience of the whole of humanity. Walking through a museum like the Shanghai Museum is to walk through not just thousands of years of history of China, but to meet people from all over China through those thousands of years and have a chance to learn from them, to admire what they made, share their delight in the world, their delight in a beautiful thing, understand what they thought it meant to be alive. That's the great power of a museum. It allows our story to be made part of a much bigger story. And even more important, I think, than the power of a museum is the power of museums in the plural. So that that story that each museum can tell can be bigger and even fuller and even richer. Objects can move around. You can widen the conversation. How did they think about the world? How did they see themselves? What's the same? What's different? It's an exercise that I think we've all realized in the last few months is more important than ever. The coronavirus has reminded us all that we are all connected. We're all alike in some very central ways, and we need to understand more about each other. Objects moving among museums, museums working together to share their collections, to share their knowledge, allows us, I think, to tell a much bigger story about each of us, not just the story of China or of India or of Mexico, but the story of all of us over thousands of years. That bigger story, the story that is of the whole world, of which all of us are a part, is, we all know, the story of the world that we're living in today. And even more important, I think, is that we need to be able to tell that story, remake that story for the world that we're all going to be living in tomorrow.